Did you ever have a psychedelic experience? Getting carried away by music, colors, sounds, totally immersed in another world? Well, the good news is you can have that experience totally sober. How? With fractal art. Fractal art is a form of digital art, algorithmic art, where fractal objects get calculated and represented as still images, animations, or immersive video experiences. The art form developed in the mid-80s and is part of the new media art. To me, it's fascinating because of the mathematical beauty that lies at the intersection of generative art and computer art. And that's why I'm excited to have fractal artist Julius Horsthuis on my show today. Julius started his career in movie making as a sound recordist, focus puller, and later on in visual effects. He also supervised films such as the Academy Award-winning Manchester by the Sea. In 2013, Julius started experimenting with digital art with fractal environments, blending cinematic animations with abstract artworks. His work quickly gained worldwide recognition, from the Creators Project, Gizmodo, Newsweek, or the Vimeo staff picks. After some high-profile projects and collaborations with musicians and other artists, he went all in and is today working as a freelance fractal artist. I talked to Julius about his inspiration and his workflow, as well as the aesthetics and technical side of his art. It's a great talk for all artists, designers, and creative entrepreneurs, so please enjoy my conversation with Julius Horsthuis.
Welcome to the Sweet Side. This is the Sweetspot Podcast with Marc Suess, investigating entrepreneurship, purpose, and the creative life.
Sweet people, it's my pleasure to introduce to you the fractal artist Julius Horsthuis. Julius, how are you?
I'm good, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have you. How are you? You're in Amsterdam right now. How is it? Home base Amsterdam.
Yes, Amsterdam here. It's very rainy right now, but it's a lovely city to live. And it's I've lived here my whole life, so I don't really know what it's like to live other places. I've traveled a lot, seen a lot, but never really lived elsewhere. Because Amsterdam is so convenient. Everything is so close by. You can go anywhere by bike. We got a really good internet connection. We got a great airport. So it's all good here.
Sounds perfect, especially as an artist. I mean, Amsterdam for artists has a huge heritage, right? I mean, even if you're a digital artist, but I mean, all the painters and all the museums, is that something that resonates with you living there? Is that a part of why you love it?
It is not really something that I think about a lot. And I don't think that I am an artist in the coming from generations of Van Goghs and Rembrandts. I really don't feel like I have anything to do with what they do. I do find them inspiring sometimes, and it's great to go to the Rijksmuseum, which has these beautiful Rembrandt paintings. But it's not really something that I think about a lot specifically, or it's just I think it's more like a coincidence that I'm in the same city as these great museums.
Okay. I want to start with your story, because today you're a fractal artist, but I want to talk a little bit about your story, because I think it's a very inspiring story. Pretty early on, you knew kind of where you wanted to go, and then you shifted from the industry that you got big in to becoming a freelance artist. But how about we start at the beginning? I read that after high school, you started working in film. So pretty early on, you were sure that you wanted to have something to do with moving images, movie industry, and you worked as a sound recordist, focus puller, and later you worked in visual effects. So what drew you into the movie business? Did you know when you were a kid, like, were you fascinated by films?
Absolutely. When I was, I think I was 12 years old, and I was already fascinated by film before that. But at 12, my parents were generous enough to give me a video recorder, VCR, video camera. Sorry, for Christmas, I think it was, or Sinterklaas, which is the Dutch version of Christmas. And I have been, from that moment, I was making films. I was not filming things. I was not like doing documentaries, but I was creating all sorts of little sketches. Together with a friend, we saw Terminator 2 and we wanted to do the same thing. So we started doing like stop motion things with like tin foil to do the T-1000 robot, or we saw Back to the Future 2. So we wanted to do like a skateboard with like a moving, like the hoverboard. And we started figuring out like, tricks, like in-camera tricks where you can do that. And we did a lot of like action films and gangster kind of films and comedy sketches, really from a young age. We were doing that and I loved it. It was just something that I knew that I wanted to do. So it was very early on. It was very obvious for me that I was going to do something with film. It was just, I wanted to apply for film school. So that is really what I was sort of like, after high school, I'm going to go do film school, because there was never any other thing that I was thinking about doing but film. Yeah.
Okay, that's amazing. And also that's something we both have in common, because I think also from a very early stage on, I never really played with toys. I always staged them like a little tableau vivant, and I showed my parents, or I got a little photo camera and I staged my toys and took like snapshots, like a storyboard or a comic frame where little battles happened. But it was all about documenting it and sharing it with other people. So that's funny.
Oh, nice.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you've been working as a visual effects artist for the industry for quite some years, right?
When I was actually when I said I wanted to go to film school, I tried to get in there, but for some reason, I never got in. The Amsterdam Film School is a quite prestigious, good film school, but they only allow, I think, 8 people per year for any specific thing, like either cinematography or directing. That were the things that I was interested in. Mm-hmm. So, not being able to get there, I started to just work to learn the industry from the practice, just by doing it. And I think this is also something that has sort of defined my own journey or career a little bit, where I never really went to school for any of the things that I know how to do, but I've all learned them on the job. So really, like literally starting the first day on the film set, having absolutely no idea what everything was. Yeah. So I was standing, I was standing right in the middle of everybody, and I was more like of a nuisance than any kind of help.
What did you do? What did you do on your first day?
Oh, it was horrible. I'm not sure. I was a boom operator, so they put me as a boom operator in a sort of like it was a Dutch a detective movies, a little bit like a German krimis, from the like the early 90s or something. Yeah. And it was like 2 people walking up the stairs, and it was a very small corridor, and then the camera was pulling back like through the corridor, and I had to boom operate that shot, which is it's a big nightmare for most like boom operators that actually know what they're doing.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And I had absolutely no idea. So I was probably knocking over lights, casting shadows on walls that were in the frame, dipping my boom in the frame. It was a complete nightmare. Yeah. And after the first day, they actually put me behind the recording car. Yeah. So I was actually being the person to check the levels and press record on each take, obviously. Yeah. So that I've been doing for a while, and then focus pulling and clapper loading and other types of things. Mm-hmm. But I was also always working with a friend on with 3D Studio Max. I was doing little experiments, and I think I had also tried a little bit, because maybe at one point I was making a film and the school needed to explode. There was like terrorists that were terrorizing our school that I was in. So we needed an explosion. So this is the first time I tried anything with visual effects, and this was like back in the late 90s. So we took the explosion from Independence Day. We sort of cut it out frame by frame and put it on the school, where the White House explodes. That one. So then at some point there was this opening in this job in visual effects, and I got into that, and I started learning the ropes from within. And so my whole journey has always been that I wanted to always make that sort of do that creative thing, and just at some point you get into where you're just learning the technical side of things. And also seeing, which was a little bit of a surprise to me, that most people around me, they were sort of content by doing just that.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, obviously you're just doing this because one day you want to make your own film, right? And they were like, no, like, you know, focus pooling is cool, or just rotoscoping is cool, or and so I just saw that I had this drive where I was just trying to learn all these tools just because I wanted to sort of have the tools to make my own weird, crazy vision.
Yeah. And from the high school White House Independence Day explosion, you worked your way up to become a visual effects artist, right?
Yeah, I mean, that took years, obviously. It wasn't like that was the reel that I submitted to the visual effects house.
How long did you work in visual effects?
Well, I think the first job I took, and it wasn't really visual effects yet. It was a company doing more like logo animations and animations, but we did also we did green screen stuff. And then slowly that got absorbed into a more larger visual effects house. But that whole period has been from 2006 to until 2018. So that's like 12 years that I worked for VFX. Yeah.
Okay. Amazing. I'm interested. There was a big leap from being a successful visual effects artist, being kind of a service provider to the creative industry, being embedded in the movie industry, working in teams, having like a whole industry surrounding yourself, leaping into being a freelance artist. So when did you know it's time to pursue the arts and go all in? What was that project like? How did it feel to you? When did you know you were ready to take the step?
Yeah, that is actually when I quit my job at the visual effects company. That was 2018. But the reason that I was able to do that was because indeed, and this was more back in 2013, where I started noticing that fractals were an amazing way to create little abstract stories, little abstract films, which was what eventually allowed me to actually to take that leap. I don't think it was like a moment where I was like suddenly realizing this. Like it's something I'd always sort of seen, but I didn't know how to do this. When I had discovered these fractals, and I mean discovered, not literally discovered, because they are discovered, but not by me, unfortunately. But when I saw what they were capable of, and when I could do what I'd learned from film and visual effects, things like compositing, because fractals are obviously something very abstract, but they're like 3D worlds in a way. So things like lighting, cinematography, composition, editing, pacing, sound design, all these kinds of things that we know from cinematography, they apply to fractals. So I could sort of marry those two worlds at some point. And it was like a slow journey. So, but that was those 5 years where maybe I posted the first video, the first little film that I'd made on Vimeo, and there actually got some likes. Actually, some total strangers on the internet liked what I had made, and that was like this huge kind of a booster and of well, you should continue with this. There's something there, and then slowly you build your audience of people that appreciate the type of art you do. You get reblogged. You get featured in some article. You get asked for immersive content, and more things like that happened. And at some point, of course, there is this moment where you know, well, if I quit my job now, I can probably live from the art that I make. And that was the 2018 point.
Okay, very, very cool. Yeah, because I think a lot of people that either work in the creative field or have entrepreneurial spirit are at a similar point. You know, when do I go rogue? When I do freelance? When do I found a company or start my career as an artist? So I like what you said. That's a gradual process of getting more and more positive feedback and then starting to earn money with it. And then at one point you, find the guts within you to say, okay, let's try this. Let's go all in. So, and today you work completely as a freelance fractal artist. And I wonder what part of your, besides the technical and animation and 3D stuff that you put into your artworks. But is there something more you took away from the world of cinema and movies, like set design or storytelling or the experience? Like, what did you keep? What did you learn from movie making that still applies to your artworks today?
Yeah, I like to think that it's there. Like, I like to think that when I create a new piece, that all my years in the movie film industry and everything that I've learned on sets, moving lights in order to do, make sure a shadow doesn't fall on another actor, like all those things, even though they don't directly really apply to the fractals, that I've sort of taken them with me, and that shows. Of course, I don't really know if that's true, and I don't think it's one specific thing. It's really that sort of all round thing where that you get when you work behind the scenes and you see sort of like through. For me, film was always magic. It was like one of the most magical things. Seeing, I was always impressed by great films as a kid. Seeing behind the scenes, like, it's not magic. That's just like this big realization that you get. It's not magic. It's just it's technique. It's all done by. You can deconstruct the whole thing, and you can sort of get there. And all those things, yes, it would be very surprising if they were not in my work. But it's hard to pinpoint exactly how and I can't give you a very specific example of that, but it's obviously there.
But it's there, and even if I watch, I will put some of your videos from your website, from Vimeo, into the show notes so that people actually watch your artworks. And I still get the feeling, if I watch your videos, there's still some rhythm to it. There's still some subconscious storytelling, I feel like, just from tempo, and there's still some kind of drama, even though it's of course abstract artworks, but I still feel like there's a rhythm to it, and there's still some kind of abstract visual storytelling going on, which I really appreciate. Yeah,
thank you. Yeah, I mean, I really that is very conscious decision, especially I think with abstract art. It is the danger with abstract art is always that you basically, the sky is the limit. You can make anything, like any kind of combination of parameters that create fractals will yield something. Any color will do something, and a lot of fractal artists, they do that, and they might like that aesthetic where it's very colorful, very, very, very abstract in a way. And what I've always liked to do is to try and you have to work, and if you want to be creative, you have to sort of work in constraint, right? You're more creative actually if you have either a deadline or if you have some other kind of constraint than if you can just do anything. So for me, the constraints, especially in the beginning, because right now I'm sort of letting go a little bit more, and it's getting more abstract, but especially my earlier work, I think, even though it's super abstract because it's all fractals, I really try to sort of emulate something from cinema, from film. So indeed, like a lot of people who use computer generated cameras in 3D animation, cameras can do anything. You can just put a keyframe there and there, but I always try to sort of have my camera moves be something like you could do it on a real dolly track or crane or something like that, or a steady cam. Try to be aware of those types of things. Try to treat the lighting like it was an actual light source. Try to sort of get the colors to something that is sort of like a palette that people sort of know, because it's already abstract. So we don't have to sort of try and get that. So all the other elements that you can control, I try to sort of really get that language of cinematography. And when you do that, when you get that sort of, cinema, sort of the music from cinema, and you get the sort of the language from cinema, and you get the pacing from cinema, maybe something like there's like something like a very quiet part, and then suddenly there's a climax, and then it goes faster. Like that kind of story structure, or like 3x structure, or story beats, or whatever you want to call it. That sort of tricks the audience a little bit into thinking that there is a story, even though there isn't a story. And then your mind sort of goes into overdrive, trying to sort of create that story of its own, which is part of the fun of the fractal, because it's very, really something that you sort of, it sparks your imagination.
It's very well said. Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive into a little bit deeper into the fractal art world, because it's said that there is a mathematical beauty of fractals, and of course that lies at the intersection of generative art and digital computer art. From my point of view, math always played a big role in art ever since, from the Greek classical sculptures to Da Vinci, Dali, Pollock, Escher, and of course it applies to today's digital art as well. So I wonder, what's your stand on this? So where do you start artworks? From a place of aesthetics and beauty, or from a place of math and numbers and code? So maybe you can give a sneak peek into your creative process and how you approach a fractal artwork.
For me, it really starts with the code. And I think maybe that's also true for the other masters that you named. For Pollock, he would start with the technique that he uses, and then that would sort of spark fractals by itself. Of course, it's no coincidence that fractals and things like the golden ratio, because that's like a big part of it, that number phi, that defines something that if you scale it down, the proportions stay the same, which is with this very unique relation that these two or that this number basically represents. And you will find that in nature everywhere. And I think that it was been very obvious to many artists that it's there. And it can very well be that if you just start from those types of rules, that you can get these very complex looking and very harmonious looking artworks. For me, because I don't use art in that way, what I actually use is I use a software called Mandelbulb 3D, where you have hundreds of formulas that are all there. They're all different kinds of formulas that use the fractal kind of thing, like using complex numbers. And so if you do that, you get all these crazy things. So when you get those formulas together, that is for me the basis. That's where the inspiration comes from, like the shapes that they yield. They go like, oh, I could tell this kind of story with that. I could tell that kind of story with that, and you can tweak them from there. Okay,
so it's a part exploration and then exploitation. So it's like an intuitive draft with basically the codes, and then something. You get hooked on something and a story comes to you, or you see something and then your imagination takes over, and then you say, okay, I can take it from here.
Yes. That is a very, very exactly how it is.
That's very cool. And also what I found, what is very interesting compared to other art forms that are maybe less digital or just a different discipline, that you are very open about your work and your process. I think from the outside, it comes from part of a maybe coding culture and also software-driven culture where you help each other out, you share pieces of code. Even you have amazing tutorials that go really into depth on your website. And what I, of course, wondered, is there something that you usually don't share? Is there a part of the inspiration or a system of reference that you use that you didn't so far or can't share with a technical tutorial?
Oh, there is definitely a lot that I can't share of a technical tutorial, just because, I have a couple of tutorials on my website, but I think I made maybe one every 2 years or something like that. And it takes me only a couple of, it takes me maybe two hours or something to create such a tutorial. So I really don't spend that much time creating tutorials. And I'm also not coming from this sort of open source code world. So I know that exists, and I know that there's a whole thing, and that's really great. But I'm really not a person. I'm not constantly on talking to people on Discord or something like that, where I'm always sharing everything. No, my workflow is actually really quite private, and that's not because I want it to be that way. It's just because that's how I am as a person. I don't constantly feel that I have to be
sharing.
but I do not absolutely. I've never had anything that I didn't want to share. There's no. I never felt that there is like a trade secret or something, or like an idea that if somebody stole that they would be able to make what I do or something that they would run with my idea. I don't think that is something that I have to be afraid of or should be afraid of. I do think that it's great to if other people are inspired, that I would give them the tools to pursue the same thing. At the same moment, I also know that my entire background in the film and really understanding, what film is and what animation is, and these types of things are probably as important or even more important than the technical knowledge of the software is. So that is just not something that you learn in a couple of tutorials. But there's another reason why I don't share my entire workflow in a tutorial, and that is because it's hard to actually make that happen, because I don't work on one computer. It's not just on this machine. I have other machines here that do network rendering. I might jump from one computer on another. I might also wait for 2 weeks, something's rendering or even something rendered, and I haven't really thought about it. And then 2 weeks later, I'm sort of taking it up again. So that would just be a very hard thing to actually to start, sharing and recording. I think that is really the reason that I don't do that a lot.
Still, I appreciate it because I know very few painters, for example, that share techniques or something. So I still think it's very cool to see that a different form of art, like digital art, has a very different approach to sharing parts of the process.
It is also kind of private in a way, and it does, like when you're working by yourself, you don't feel like anyone is watching you. You work in a different way because you're not performing, and if you know that people are watching, you might be, there's a different part of your brain thinking about that part. Oh, it's not just me working, it's also other people seeing this, and I might not even be aware of some things that I do. Maybe I'm like talking in myself or something when I'm actually working, and that's just something that you're not, then suddenly you're so there is part of it is also just that it is a private thing, even though there's no secrets or anything like that. I think that might also go for.
Yeah, I think that applies to nearly any kind of creative work. You have to go into flow moment where you're not too self-conscious about the whole process and yourself. Yeah, but some people can do that some artists, they do work on, for instance, on festivals. I've seen painters, that's right,
and they just make so they are apparently probably fine with onlookers. Yeah,
shun them out. All right. I also wondered, we talked a lot about technology now and your home being filled with servers and software, but looking at your art and also what you said about the making it feel like cinematography, and there are real textures and camera movement that feel like I could actually film this in the real world. So I also wonder, do you draw inspiration from nature or architecture? I mean, how do you walk through the world? Is there something that always strikes you as interesting or inspiring for your art?
Really, inspiration for my art comes very often, I think, in music. Music is very inspiring. Also other films, which if I was a filmmaker, that would probably make me a bad filmmaker. If a filmmaker should not draw from other films. But I think as a fractal artist, it's okay to actually be inspired by a film. I was watching Blade Runner and I wanted to do something like this sort of, foggy, neon lit, cyberpunky town. And I did a piece with that, and that sort of created this whole new sort of look that I was able to do with fractals with. I was watching Prometheus, and with this sort of the whole thick atmosphere, and then this sort of like weird kind of half natural, half like man-made constructed type of geometry, interesting things with that. So I do get a lot of my inspiration from film. There's a lot from music, and yes, there is also indeed from I love walking through any type of city, and watching architecture, watching places. I like the whole 3D-ness of a city, if that makes any sense. Just the fact that you can walk through and that there's like other things behind things, and there's like that sort of stuff really inspires me. And And it probably inspires me to make fractals. Yeah.
I want to circle back to the technology, because we now talked about your tech setup to create the art, but also I'm interested in the staging of your artworks, because I saw one of your projects online. It was for the Art Tech House in New York. Your exhibition, your piece was called Geometric Properties, and it feels to me like it was the perfect exhibition space with projections on the wall and on the floor, amazing sound. Can you tell us more about that project? How did it came to be?
Yes, Art Tech House is a digital art gallery or art space. I'm not sure exactly which term they use. In America, the first time they called me when they only had a place in Washington D.C., which is a little bit. Well, it's not. I don't think it's smaller then, but it's definitely a little bit simpler, as in it doesn't also have the floor. So it's basically like a large room where 3 walls are covered with projection. And they showed this to me and they said, well, what do you think fractals would look on a place like this? And I said, well, I've never tried. I don't know. So they said, well, you want to try? And I was like, yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Yeah,
absolutely. So we did a little test where we put just some existing material on it. And I know that when you have it on a large screen, so I've done some domes before, it works very well. Fractals have inherently this super detailed structure. It's like it's full of detail, even if you zoom into the detail, there's more detail and more detail and more detail. And when this detail surrounds you, it can sort of feel let's say awesome, but not awesome in the colloquial term, but like literally awe-inspiring, maybe is better. So I created something that was back in 2018 with them, and I think it ran in Washington D.C. for 3 months, and it was nice. It was great. And then they opened this really nice location. I think it was 2019 at the Chelsea Market in Manhattan, which was a prime location as well. And they had this boiler room that they completely stripped, and they had this crazy amount of pixels. What they have, I think they used like 18 projectors, and altogether it is like 95 million pixels, completely surrounding you. It is quite insane. So I was like, well, can I do that one as well? And I was like, that's sure. So when you make something for a place like that, you have to take, and this is also something that you learned the first time in Washington, D.C. And then, of course, you see it and it was like, okay, well, there's so much more that I need to understand about, because it's a different type of experiencing. Everything is if it's larger, you have to do much slower things. So I made this like long half-hour, very high-resolution thing that sort of fits exactly in that space, called Geometric Properties. And it was, I think people loved it. It was a big success, as in terms of how many people have actually gone out of their way and actually just watched fractals for an hour, be immersed in fractals for an hour. And you also there, also together with the musicians, you create a story, you create a sense of that there is something that evolves to a climax, and that there is this sort of theme through it, that you are actually getting a glimpse of something that is out there in a mathematical world, where you sort of have this pinnacle moment where you're sort of realizing that you can do that with colors, you can do it with audio. And people really felt that, and it was a great experience. I was so grateful that I was allowed to show my art in that space. And definitely immersive venues are the very best for this. Yeah,
it's such an amazing look. I'll put a link to the documentation, video, photos of that into the show notes. People, you gotta watch this. It looks so great, especially if things move from the wall down over the floor towards you and stuff like that. It's really like you're in a, I don't know, you're in a roller coaster ride, a movie theater, something in between. It's totally immersive. I really enjoyed watching that one.
Yeah, it's a slow roller coaster then.
Yeah.
I think that's also something, it's just it's not it is something that feels very serene or meditative almost in a way.
Because at this point, a lot of people are always like, they compare this whole experience and the look and feel of fractal artworks to psychedelics, because it has this immersive, colorful, pulsating. It's always or oftentimes connected to music. I know you're totally off drugs, but what role does it play to have like psychedelic experiences, either beforehand or going into that? Is that something that you fiddled with, like the whole 70s psychedelic aesthetics or druggy experiences, or is that something that's just connected to it because it's also kind of a colorful, immersive experience?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had anything specific with the psychedelic community or with the looks of the 70s or 80s and these things. I don't think they've ever really spoken to me. But what has spoken to me is the music from, let's say, the psychedelic community. So there was I've already I had one friend, like all my friends were listening to different music, but one friend, he was listening to sort of like psytrance and maybe sort of like also slower psychedelic dub or these types of genres of music. And they always spoke to me a lot because there was just something, it seems more layered. There's like more texture to it. It's very intricate. And I don't know, maybe this is just how my brain works, that I sort of like that kind of stuff. I don't know why. Like most people tell me that they only like that music when they're on psychedelics. And so maybe whatever the experience is for most people when they're on psychedelics is for me is the normal experience. That is possible.
Well said,
yeah, like you never know what other people's experience is, and if I am on psychedelics, it's maybe too much, or it's like getting the overdrive, in the wrong direction. Whereas for other people, maybe it gets it in the right direction. So this is maybe, I guess one of those untestable theories. But yeah, so I don't think the looks specifically are something that I enjoy, but definitely the music. And I guess. Yeah, that's probably not a coincidence that type of stuff appeals to me then.
Yeah, totally. How do you pick music for your projects? Is it a collaboration? Do you have certain musicians you work with, or you find music, or is it written specifically for certain projects?
Yeah, all of the above.
Okay.
I've done all of those things. So I tend to spend a lot of time and love getting the right music for my work. Without the music, it's nothing. I like I said, I get inspired by the music. So I did a piece that maybe was inspired by James Cameron's Avatar, and I actually put the music from Avatar, the James Horner soundtrack, under it. This was years ago, and that for me, that immediately sort of creates it. Gives this level. This is, of course, when I was just starting out, and I was just basically just taking music from Spotify and SoundCloud and whatever. As the years went by, I was able to actually work with some artists that I really also admired, and so now I'm also in a position where I can ask a composer to actually compose the music for the Fractal. So I've worked both ways. You start with the music, you put the Fractal to the music, and you start with the Fractal and you put the music to the Fractal.
Yeah.
For instance, for the like one composer that I was really a fan of is called Michael Stearns, and he did the soundtrack for the films Baraka and Samsara. And if you're not familiar with those are some like full length, beautifully filmed on IMAX format films that doesn't really have a story, but it shows cultures from all over the world, and it connects them with time lapse photography of clouds and cities. And he made this beautiful soundtrack of that, and now I'm actually working with him, and I was working with him for the geometric properties exhibit. So that's the type of where you're suddenly working with a composer that you really sort of feel that connection with. And those types of music are made for visuals. So you have music like dance music, which is often, it's not, even if I could love like this dance track or it's not made for a visual thing. So try as you might, it never really sort of works. But if you have visual music that is sort of like, has a story, has an arc, it can be classical music, it can be electronic music, it can be any genre, but I sort of classify it in a visual music. You can do so many cool things with it.
That sounds like an awesome collaboration. So yeah, and now we have to circle back to the New York exhibition, because my understanding is that tech plays a huge role in presenting your art. I mean, compared to paintings or sculptures that you could just put into a room, maybe take care of some lighting, but then you can present the artwork. And if you want to show fractal arts and create an immersive experience, there goes a lot of knowledge and technology into the presentation. So my understanding is that you don't do tech yourself, meaning whenever you display your artworks, the room has to match your standards for sound and projection. And I feel like after your New York exhibition had the perfect setup, is it now harder than it was before? How do you look for venues, or how do you find some?
This is what I mean by when I say I don't look for locations. It's like, because that New York thing looked great, and I have a lot of people that have like asked me, hey, like I've got this cool warehouse. What could you do here? But that would mean that I would have to make sure that, the projectors are there and there's a whole system. Mm-hmm. And some artists work like that. They're like, I would say maybe installation arts, they know exactly how to set up a space like that. I don't feel like I do that. Like I feel like, like a director doesn't pick the cinema. It's just like, cinemas, they know to do all the stuff. So I really just create the content, and of course I work with the space that I'm doing it for, but I'm not scouting out places. Rather, I tend to look for places that already have the whole thing there, or which actually happens more often. They call me, they've seen my work, and they go like, well, what would the fractals look like in here? And this could be an immersive space like that. It could be a dome, like a planetarium dome, or anything. And there's like lots of things now with LED walls, and there's the craziest ways to do immersive art.
Yeah. And I would like to point that out, because to me, that's an important lesson here for all creatives or artists or even entrepreneurs, because you know what you want to do. You want to focus on creating the artwork. And you're not want to get involved with too much of the technology. You could as well also try and set up rooms and everything. But I think at one point you just made the decision, what can I do best and what do I want to put my time in? So you want to create the artworks, the whole experience, and then you just go out and find a room or have someone contact you or whatever. So is that a realization that you've been working towards, or was that very clear from the beginning? I'm going to focus on the art and I'm going to let the tech in the rooms be the tech in the rooms, and it's going to come to me.
Yeah, no, that is something that I have been slowly discovering. And this is also because first it was never an issue. Like no one was asking me, hey, what could you do with this space? So first you really just focus on the content anyway. And people will just one day ask you to create something, and it will be something for the flat format that I've been working on before. Yeah. And now they see something immersive, and then they call you for, hey, could you do the immersive? So it's only now that I have to start thinking about, well, actually, no, that's not something that I can only do this part of that. Yep. And this is something that you start learning as you go, how to communicate these types of things. First, I think I was also for quite a long time, I was just saying yes to everything. If anybody was like any kind of thing, hey, could you do fractals for this event? Could you do fractals for this music video? Could you do fractals for your book? Yep, sure. Yeah, let's try it. I wanted to see every type of thing, because you want to understand what are the limitations of fractals. What should you not do? What should you do? Again, this is not something that's conscious, but this was just something I was excited about. That's why I said yes. Now I'm at a place where I can't say yes to everything, because it would be too much. But also, then you have to start thinking, well, what kind of projects do I want to pursue? And those are things that I think any artists beginning or even professional or advanced have to at some point think about to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very much and I make mistakes still a lot. Like I think, I should not have said yes to that, or I should have said yes to this, or that, like those types of things.
Fail again and have the learning curve up there, definitely. So you talked about a lot of creative artworks you did for music, for installation, for the flat screens. You also did some NFTs. So what role do NFT artworks play for you?
Well, I hope not that not much. For me, NFTs were something that everybody started to be really excited about. I think I learned of them about, maybe this was in 2019, like early 2019 is the first time that there's another sort of artist who, I think he calls himself maybe a psychedelic artist, but he's definitely also doing some fractals. And he told me about this whole crypto art world. And for me, that sounded like something very niche, and it didn't really want to. It sounded very much like a community thing, and again, like for me, that's not the way I'm wired, and I just work quite solitary. And these people were always trying to sort of help each other out and doing many things, and that's just that didn't feel like me. And then, of course, there was this like huge moment where Beeple, the digital artist, suddenly sold his NFT for $69 million at Christie's, and everybody suddenly started talking about NFT. So a lot of people called me up and like, hey, well, you're a digital artist. You're going to be a millionaire by next month. Like that was literally the way people sort of, try to get you on that bandwagon. And well, maybe if I had done it very early on, they wouldn't even be wrong. But I waited for quite a while, especially because it doesn't, like, if everybody starts doing it, it's sort of, I have this automatic thing. Well, I should probably not do that, because if lots of other people are doing it, I'd rather do something different. Mm-hmm. And also because the mode, just pure getting rich as a motivation doesn't sound right. It doesn't feel completely right. But I have. So the exhibition in New York, the Geometric Properties one that you mentioned, they had a collaboration with Nifty Gateway, and they wanted to sell some parts of the artwork as an NFT. So I had one drop at Nifty Gateway, and that is really actually for my own art as far as NFTs. As far as the interest really goes.
Where do you see your art evolving? Not for the whole industry, not for the art market, the digital art market in general, but your journey. What do you think is the next stop going to be? Because it doesn't sound like you're going to go down the road of NFT all in. It's more like, I wonder where's the new frontier? Do you fiddle about the artworks for the metaverse, or go into more virtual reality if everyone gets their glasses for home? Or what influences and what technologies are interesting to you for your own future?
Yeah, so I was a little torn between, I think I've gone back and forth. So the first time I did something immersive was for VR. There was this musician, and he had one of the first VR goggles. There was the Oculus DK2. Mm-hmm. Not many people had one yet, and it was hard to get, I think. And he flew from Sweden. He flew to Amsterdam, and he said, "Well, here you have mine. Please make some fractals for it." He was like he loved fractals. He could he watches fractals all day long, I think. So I started rendering just a very simple test, 360-degree video of a fractal fly through, and then I put on the headset. I was like, "Oh my god, this is!" And I was still working for the company, and I told my colleagues, and my colleagues, they were all like, "These fractals are weird, man." Like they didn't really feel it, or they were like kind of like, "Yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool, but can it do?" Can you do EXR exports? I was like, nope. They're like, okay, well then we're not interested.
Yeah.
So they weren't very they weren't very amazed by the fractals. But when they saw the VR fractals, they were like, oh my god! And everybody was constantly tripping with these VR headsets. So it started with that VR thing, and then I suddenly learned full dome, because whatever you render for VR, you could also show in this dome thing, and these were at festivals. Now, the first one I did was in Montreal, was the SAT Dome. And I suddenly started liking that because of the fact that there's like a lot of people together. And VR is this solitary thing, right? And with Dome, it's like the whole room was sort of going through that flying roller coaster spaceship thing together. And that was just something I was like, yeah, I think I like these physical spaces of immersive art more. But now I'm doing a VR piece again. So I might be going back on the VR and the yes. So I think this is something that I don't know where that is going to go. Like, is it going to land somewhere? Is it going to land with the VR and the metaverse? Although I wouldn't really call it the metaverse, because it's not an online experience. It's not a social experience either. It's just sitting there, enjoying these otherworldly places. So where it will end, I don't know.
It's interesting, and it's I think always an inspiration to see or to hear how an artist like yourself explores new things, and where I'm going to go down this road, I'm going to explore this. And I also appreciate what you said about the shared experiences, because especially with digital art, I think having the possibility to share it with other people, like you said, in a dome, is something really special. And I think something that's gonna, I don't know, maybe divide the whole media and art landscape a little bit, going into VR and personal, very private metaverse experiences, and then also the value of shared experiences, So I think that's interesting. I have my last two questions for you already, which I'm asking every one of my guests. So one of which we already touched a little bit. So I'm very interested in what's next from Julius. What can we look forward to? Is there something coming up, some exhibition, new artworks, videos? What can you look forward to?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is a year that hopefully we'll see definitely some new things coming out. A couple of things can't talk about it yet.
Okay.
But what I can talk about is the VR experience that I've been working on for about 8 months now. That should come out this year, but it will probably be towards the end of the year. This is probably my longest and most involved thing yet. Even also for just flat films that I've made, but this is like a three-dimensional VR. So it's like stereoscopic. So it's like this. The experience is really like, if you put the VR headset on there, you are absolutely in these places. The technical side is something that we're still sort of trying to figure out, but because they're very high resolution of files, it's kind of, it's kind of a thing how to get that sort of high res files, because streaming won't work. It will look too blocky and too grainy so it needs to be really like a premium experience, maybe with binaural audio, that type of thing. So this is something that I'm actually quite far with the project already. I've got like for all the fractal films, I'm still looking for the music, but the actual fractals are let's say 70% there, and I've showed it to some people and they were really, really amazed. So that is something that I'm really sort of working on this year as well, and hopefully that's going to be that's going to be great. And then other projects for the future, definitely mostly going to be immersive experiences, and full dome types of things. Yes. All
right, cool. And we can all check your website, and I guess there we're going to learn what is happening.
Yes, at some point I will have the announcements there. I'm not the best at keeping my website up to date, so so the socials is probably a little bit of a better way to sort of learn when something would launch like that. Yes.
And I'm also going to put up some links to your Instagram and YouTube, and people will follow and learn about it. So my last question is, I tend to enjoy it if people, my guests, can recommend something that inspires them at the moment. Sometimes I get movies, theater plays, books, walks through certain kind of architecture might be something from you, or even music. So is there something that inspires you this day, this week's, that you want to share with us?
Yeah. there is lots of things, like I said, that inspires me. Something that's just very recent that I was really impressed by, and maybe people that know my work are sort of surprised that I would be interested in that, because it's quite different from what I do. But I think there's also a connection there a lot. Is the new Steven Spielberg remake of the West Side Story, which is something I just saw last week in the cinema. And of course, I know the music from Bernstein from as a kid. I think maybe I heard my parents were like maybe playing the record or something. And I think the movie was extremely well made. It was beautiful. And I love the set design and also the way it's edited. And I love when music and visuals come together. And I think in a musical, even though usually the music I listen to is never songs, it never contains people singing. And it's much more electronic and instrumental. Even though that there's a very layered and complex thing going on between music and cinematography and set design, which I really loved. And yeah, this is really something that I was very inspired by.
Perfect. Sweet people, I put this in the show notes. You can check it out. Julius, thank you so much for your time. It was very interesting to dive into the fractal art world. So thanks for sharing.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure.
Take care. Thank you. That was my conversation with Julius Horsthuis. I hope you enjoyed our talk about the inspiration of nature and architecture for his digital artworks, and also his storytelling approach for abstract art. I believe there is a lot to learn about finding your entrepreneurial and artistic path, and at the same time finding creative ways to work with technology. Next week, I'll be talking to Finnegan Shepherd. He is a writer with a background in philosophy and also an entrepreneur. After his own transition, he founded Both and, a fashion brand that specializes in clothes for trans masculine, non-binary, and AFAB people. That's it for today. Take care, and I'll hear you next Wednesday on the Sweet Side.
This podcast is produced by Sweetspot Studio. New episodes each week, wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you enjoyed the show, leave a rating and subscribe to never miss an episode. Find out more at sweetspot-studio.com.